Karen stormed up the pristine driveway, her face twisted in rage. She pounded on the front door of the imposing mansion, her shrill voice cutting through the tranquil suburban air. "I know you're in there, Senator. Come out and face me, you elitist pig." The door swung open, revealing a tall, composed man in an immaculate suit. "Mrs. Walters, to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Karen thrust a stack of papers in his face. "These are the permits you denied for our community garden. How dare you sabotage our efforts to bring this neighborhood together?" The senator's brow furrowed. "I'm afraid I don't recall that specific case. Perhaps we could discuss this in a more civil manner." "Civil?" Karen screeched. "You politicians think you can just steamroll over the little people whenever you want. Well, not this time." She jabbed a finger at his chest. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows what a heartless monster you are." The senator held up a hand. "Mrs. Walters, I understand your passion, but I assure you there is more to this situation than you realize. If you would be willing to—" "Save it," Karen interrupted. "I'm not going anywhere until you admit your wrongdoing and fix this mess." She planted herself on the doorstep, arms crossed defiantly. The senator regarded her for a moment, then sighed. "Very well. If you insist on making a scene, then I suppose we have no choice but to continue this discussion out here." He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Karen's eyes narrowed. "So you think you can intimidate me with your fancy house and political clout? Well, think again. I'm not going anywhere until—" Her words were cut off as the senator reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small card, holding it up for her to see. "Mrs. Walters, I am Senator William Harrington. I believe you may have made some assumptions about my identity." Karen's face drained of color as she stared at the card, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The realization of who she had been berating dawned on her, and she took a step back, her bravado evaporating. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. I had no idea." The senator regarded her calmly. "Perhaps we could continue this discussion in a more appropriate setting, where we can address your concerns without the need for theatrics." Karen nodded mutely, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As she followed the senator inside, a growing sense of dread filled the pit of her stomach. She had just confronted one of the most powerful men in the country, and the consequences of her actions were only just beginning to sink in. The grand foyer of the senator's mansion was a stark contrast to the confrontation that had just played out on the doorstep. Karen shuffled behind the senator, her eyes darting around nervously, taking in the opulent decor and the stern-faced security guards who watched her every move. "Please, have a seat," the senator said, gesturing to a plush leather couch. "Would you like some tea or coffee?" Karen hesitated, then slowly lowered herself onto the couch, her hands trembling. "And no, thank you," she stammered. "I just want to get this over with." The senator nodded and sat down across from her, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Walters, I must admit, I'm quite surprised by your behavior. I've never encountered such direct confrontation from a constituent before." Karen swallowed hard, her face flushing with embarrassment. I'm sorry, Senator Harrington. I had no idea it was you. I was just so frustrated with the permit situation, and I understand your frustration," the senator interrupted, raising a hand. "But that does not excuse the way you chose to address it. Shouting and making accusations on my doorstep is hardly the most effective way to resolve a problem." Karen's shoulders slumped further. I know. I felt so powerless, and I thought if I could make a big enough scene, maybe you would listen to me." She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to disrespect you or your office." The senator studied her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. "Well, Mrs. Walters, I must say, you've certainly succeeded in getting my attention." Now, why don't you tell me more about this community garden project of yours? Karen blinked in surprise, her eyes widening. You want to hear about it? Of course, the senator replied. As your elected representative, it's my duty to understand the concerns and priorities of the people I serve. So please enlighten me. Cautiously, Karen began to explain the details of the community garden project, her initial nervousness gradually giving way to a sense of cautious optimism. Perhaps, she thought, this confrontation might not be the end of the world after all. As Karen outlined the community garden project, the senator listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. When she had finished, he leaned forward, his fingers steepled thoughtfully. I see. And you believe this project would bring the neighborhood together, foster a sense of community, and provide fresh, locally grown produce for the residents? Karen nodded eagerly. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what we were hoping to accomplish. The permits were just a formality, but when they were denied, it felt like our entire vision was being undermined. The senator nodded slowly. I can certainly understand your frustration. Community building initiatives like this can be immensely valuable, and I regret that the permit process has been a source of difficulty. Karen's eyes widened in surprise. So, you'll help us. You'll approve the permits. The senator held up a hand. Now hold on. I didn't say that. I simply understand your perspective better now. However, there may be valid reasons why the permits were denied in the first place. Zoning regulations, environmental concerns, or other considerations that I'm not privy to. Karen's face fell. But you're the senator. Surely you have the power to override those decisions. I do have a certain degree of influence, the senator acknowledged, but I must be careful not to abuse that power. There are checks and balances in place for a reason, and I wouldn't want to undermine the democratic process, even if it means disappointing a constituent. Karen's brow furrowed in frustration. So, what are you saying? That there's nothing you can do to help us? The senator leaned back in his chair, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. I didn't say that, Mrs. Walters. What I'm suggesting is that we work together to find a solution that addresses both your community's needs and the legitimate concerns of the authorities involved. Karen paused, considering his words. You mean? Negotiate. Precisely, the senator replied. If we can approach this constructively and find common ground, I believe we can find a way to make your community garden project a reality. It may require some compromises, but I'm willing to put in the effort if you are. Karen's expression shifted from one of resignation to cautious optimism. All right, Senator Harrington. I'm listening. Over the next hour, the senator and Karen engaged in a back-and-forth negotiation, each side presenting their concerns and exploring potential solutions. It was a delicate dance, with the senator drawing on his political experience and Karen's passion for the community garden project. The main issue we're facing is the zoning regulations, the senator explained. The property you've selected is currently designated for residential use, and the city has strict guidelines about what can be built there. Karen frowned. But it's just a community garden. Surely that's not a threat to the neighborhood. Normally, I would agree, the senator said. However, the city has concerns about traffic, parking, and potential noise and waste issues that come with increased activity in a residential area. That's ridiculous, Karen exclaimed. We're talking about a few raised garden beds, not a commercial operation. Surely we can address those concerns in a reasonable way. The senator held up a hand. I understand your frustration, Mrs. Walters, and I believe we can find a solution, but it may require some creativity and compromise on both our parts. Karen sighed, deflating slightly. All right, fine. What did you have in mind? The senator leaned forward, a thoughtful expression on his face. What if, instead of a single community garden, we expanded the project to include several smaller gardens spread throughout the neighborhood? Karen blinked, taken aback by the suggestion. Smaller gardens? But that would require more work, more coordination. Precisely, the senator said. But it would also address the city's concerns about concentrated activity in one area. By distributing the gardens, we can mitigate the impact on the surrounding residents and make the project more palatable to the zoning authorities. Karen considered the proposal, her brow furrowed in concentration. It's an interesting idea. But how would we coordinate something like that? And what are the logistics of maintaining multiple gardens? The senator smiled. That's where I can help. As your senator, I have the resources and connections to facilitate the necessary permits, funding, and organizational support to make this work. All I ask in return is your willingness to be flexible and work with me to find a solution that benefits the entire community. Karen hesitated, then slowly nodded. All right, Senator Harrington. I'm willing to give it a try. For the sake of the garden and the neighborhood, I'll do whatever it takes. The senator's smile widened. Excellent. I believe this is the start of a very fruitful partnership, Mrs. Walters. Over the next several weeks, Karen and Senator Harrington worked closely together to bring the expanded community garden project to life. It was a complex endeavor, requiring coordination with the city, securing funding and resources, and mobilizing a network of volunteers across the neighborhood. Despite the challenges, Karen was surprised to find herself developing a genuine respect and even a fondness for the senator. She had initially pegged him as a cold, aloof politician, but as they spent more time together, she began to see a different side of him. He was attentive to the community's needs, actively listening to her concerns and ideas. He was also surprisingly hands-on, rolling up his sleeves and getting his hands dirty alongside the volunteers. The senator's passion for public service and his commitment to making a tangible difference in people's lives was undeniable. I have to say, Senator Harrington, I'm impressed, Karen said one day as they were inspecting the progress of one of the new garden sites. I never would have expected you to be so involved. The senator chuckled. Well, Mrs. Walters, I may be a politician, but I'm also a firm believer in leading by example. And besides, I enjoy getting my hands dirty every now and then. Karen smiled, shaking her head in disbelief. You know, when I first showed up on your doorstep, I was so sure you were just another out-of-touch politician. But now, I can honestly say that you're one of the most dedicated and genuine public servants I've ever had the pleasure of working with. The senator's expression softened. I appreciate your honesty, Karen, and I'm grateful that you were willing to give me a chance, despite our initial misunderstanding. Karen nodded, her eyes growing slightly misty. You know, I have to admit, I was pretty terrified when I realized who you were. I thought for sure my political career was over before it even started. The senator placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze earnest. Karen, I want you to know that there are no hard feelings. In fact, I admire your passion and your willingness to stand up for your community. Those are the kinds of qualities I look for in the people I work with. Karen stared at him in disbelief. You mean, you want to work with me, even after the way I treated you? The senator smiled. Absolutely. I believe that together, we can accomplish great things for this neighborhood and beyond. What do you say, partner? Karen felt a surge of emotion as she realized the depth of the senator's sincerity. Reaching out, she clasped his hand firmly, a warm smile spreading across her face. Partner, she agreed. I can't wait to see what we can achieve. As the community garden project progressed, the partnership between Karen and Senator Harrington grew stronger with each passing day. They worked tirelessly, overcoming obstacles and navigating the bureaucratic red tape that threatened to derail their efforts. Through it all, Karen marveled at the senator's unwavering commitment and his genuine concern for the well-being of her community. Gone were the preconceptions she had held about politicians being out-of-touch elitists. In their place, a deep respect and admiration had blossomed. One afternoon, as they were reviewing the final plans for the last garden site, Karen couldn't help but voice a question that had been weighing on her mind. Senator Harrington, can I ask you something? The senator looked up from the documents, a warm smile on his face. Of course, Karen. What's on your mind? Karen hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I've been wondering. Why? Why did you go to such lengths to help us with this project, even after the way I treated you? The senator's expression softened, and he leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands together. That's a fair question, Karen. To be honest, I was quite taken aback by your initial confrontation. I'll admit, I was tempted to simply dismiss you and move on. Karen felt a pang of regret, but the senator raised a hand, silencing her before she could speak. However, he continued, as I listened to your explanation and saw the genuine passion you had for this community, something shifted within me. I realized that your actions, while misguided, were rooted in a deep desire to make a difference, a desire that I could relate to. The senator paused, his gaze distant for a moment. You see, Karen, I didn't grow up with wealth or privilege. I came from a humble background, and I know firsthand the struggles that communities like this one can face. That's why public service has always been so important to me. It's my way of giving back and making a real difference in people's lives. Karen's eyes widened as the senator's words sank in. I had no idea, she murmured, feeling a renewed sense of respect and understanding for the man before her. The senator smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Well, I don't exactly make a habit of broadcasting my personal history, but I felt it was important for you to know that I'm not just some out-of-touch politician. I'm someone who genuinely cares about the people I serve and who will go to great lengths to help them succeed. Karen reached across the table, placing her hand on the senator's arm. Thank you, William, she said, using his first name for the first time. Thank you for giving me a chance, and for showing me that there are still good people in politics who genuinely want to make a difference. The senator covered her hand with his own, his expression warm and sincere. The pleasure is all mine, Karen. Now let's get back to work. We've got a community garden to finish. As the community garden project neared completion, Karen and Senator Harrington's partnership continued to grow stronger. They had overcome numerous challenges together, from navigating bureaucratic red tape to securing funding and mobilizing volunteers. Through it all, Karen had come to see the senator in a completely new light. What had once been a caricature of a cold, distant politician had transformed into a genuine, compassionate leader who truly cared about the people he served. One evening, as they were reviewing the final budget and timeline for the project, Karen couldn't help but voice a question that had been weighing on her mind. Senator Harrington, can I ask you something personal? The senator looked up from the documents, a warm smile on his face. Of course, Karen. What is it? Karen hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Well, you mentioned before that you didn't grow up with wealth or privilege. I was wondering, what was your upbringing like? The senator's expression softened, and he leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands together. That's a fair question, Karen. To be honest, it's not something I often share, but I feel I owe you an explanation, given the nature of our partnership. Karen nodded, her eyes filled with curiosity and understanding. You see, I grew up in a small, working-class town in the Midwest, the senator began. My parents were both factory workers, struggling to make ends meet and provide for my sister and me. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and a deep sense of community that was forged through hard work and mutual support. Karen listened intently, her heart swelling with empathy as the senator's words painted a vivid picture of his childhood. As I grew older, I saw firsthand the challenges that families in our community faced: the lack of access to quality education, the constant struggle to find stable employment, the sense of hopelessness that could so easily take hold. And it was those experiences that ultimately inspired me to pursue a career in public service. The senator paused, his gaze distant for a moment. I wanted to be the kind of leader who could make a real difference in the lives of people like my parents, who fought tirelessly to provide for their family. And that's why this community garden project has been so important to me. It's a chance to give back, to empower people, and to build the kind of vibrant, close-knit community that I grew up with. Karen felt a lump in her throat as she listened, her admiration for the senator growing with every word. That's incredibly inspiring, William, she said, using his first name again. I had no idea you had such a deep personal connection to the work we're doing here. The senator smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Well, as I said, it's not something I often share, but I felt it was important for you to understand where I'm coming from, and why this project means so much to me. Karen reached across the table, placing her hand on the senator's arm. Thank you for sharing that with me, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It makes me even more proud to be a part of this journey with you. The senator covered her hand with his own, his expression warm and sincere. The pleasure is all mine, Karen. Now let's get back to work. We've got a community garden to finish. As the community garden project neared its grand opening, Karen and Senator Harrington found themselves basking in the glow of their hard-won success. The once divided neighborhood had come together, united by a shared sense of pride and ownership over the vibrant oasis that had sprung up across multiple sites. Karen marveled at the transformation, both in the physical landscape and in the relationships that had blossomed between the residents. Where there had once been apathy and mistrust, there was now a palpable energy of community and camaraderie. And at the heart of it all stood Senator Harrington, whose unwavering support and guidance had been instrumental in making the project a reality. Karen had come to see him not just as a political figure, but as a true partner and friend. On the day of the grand opening, Karen stood beside the senator, beaming with pride as she addressed the gathered crowd. Friends, neighbors, and honored guests, she began, her voice resonating with a newfound confidence. Today, we celebrate the realization of a dream to transform our community, to bring us closer together, and to cultivate a deep sense of belonging. The crowd erupted in applause, and Karen paused, allowing the moment to sink in. When the cheers had subsided, she continued, her gaze shifting to the senator. And none of this would have been possible without the tireless efforts and unwavering support of our esteemed Senator, William Harrington. The crowd erupted in cheers once more, and Karen felt a surge of emotion as she watched the senator step forward, his expression humble and sincere. Thank you, Karen, for those kind words, he began, his voice carrying a warmth that belied his political stature. But the true heroes here are all of you, the members of this community who have come together to make this dream a reality. As the senator spoke, Karen couldn't help but notice a subtle shift in the crowd's demeanor. There was a newfound respect and admiration in their eyes, a recognition that this was no longer just a senator, but a partner and champion for their cause. And in that moment, Karen realized that the true power of this project lay not just in the physical transformation of the neighborhood, but in the way it had bridged the gap between the community and its elected representatives. As the senator concluded his remarks and the crowd erupted in thunderous applause, Karen felt a sense of profound pride and gratitude. She had once seen the senator as an unapproachable, out-of-touch figure, but now she regarded him as a true ally and friend, a testament to the transformative power of empathy, understanding, and a shared commitment to making a difference. With a smile, Karen stepped forward, clasping the senator's hand in a warm handshake. Together, they had proven that even the most daunting challenges could be overcome when a community stood united, and she couldn't wait to see what other surprises the future had in store.